Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Timothy Spangler. I'm a partner at the law firm Practus, LLP. We're being joined today by Melissa Noon of ISS-Corporate. We're going to be talking about their annual fee study, and so glad to have Melissa joining here to have this, very, very important discussion. Let me give you a bit of background. My legal practice focuses on a number of different areas around investment management, fund managers, fund boards. And so these sorts of questions come up regularly. And I think the annual fee study that ISS Corporate has put together is a real phenomenal contribution to the discussion and analysis of these sorts of questions. Melissa, can you tell us a little bit about your role at ISS and your experience generally in the market?
Great. Thanks, Tim. So I'm the head of the 15C board services within ISS Corporate, and I've been here at ISS for almost a decade, but I have nearly, well, I guess actually 21 or 22 years of experience within the 15C industry.
So tell us about the annual fee study. What is it meant to accomplish, and why is it important for people in the investment management industry to take some time, crack it open, and go through its results?
Sure. Well, it's really just it's a data review of fees and expenses. So we're looking at both contractual management and actual expenses of active open-end mutual funds. So you're not going to have data in there from index funds, exchange traded funds, closed-end funds, and funds of funds, for example.
Now, I know a lot of people will be focused on, well, the provenance of the data, where does it come from? Can you give us a little bit about the processes and procedures, get in the weeds a bit about how this data was collected, how was it gathered and presented in the report?
Sure. So most of the data comes from, public documents for the fund industry. So the prospectus, statement of additional information, and the annual reports. And our data teams at ISS compile the data and derive whatever ratios we need for the actual reporting. But also, I think the other thing with this data that where it comes from is, just to make sure that everybody understands that this is all data that's compiled within our database. And so it's from the public documents, it's compiled, and then we take all of that data to consolidate it into the annual fee studies.
Now, there's tons of data out there. I remember Edgar and the movement on to more easily accessible information in and around the investment management industry. So boards and advisors, as I found, are actually looking even more for insights, extracting conclusions and directionality from the data. So it's great to understand better how the data has been compiled in the annual fee study. What can you tell us about looking at the fiscal year 2024 data? What's going on? What are the insights that boards and advisors could draw from what ISS has put together?
Sure, great question. So what we aim to do is to provide this data to fund boards, product managers, legal counsel, consultants, to really help them have a comprehensive place for their data when they're looking at setting prices or evaluating expenses. Many of our clients use this study in addition to 15C peer grouping. So it's an additional look, more of a broad universe level view. And so what happens with that when you're talking about the data and we look at 2024, I think it wouldn't be a surprise for me to say that, we're still seeing an overall reduction in expenses within this industry and particularly within this section of the active open-end mutual funds. But that's kind of the big picture view. And you hear about that in the media. From 2023 to fiscal year 2024, there was a median reduction in total expenses excluding distribution, but it only ranged from about a fraction of a basis point to about 9 basis points across the investment categories. So that's what you hear. But if you look and you break this down, which is what we do in the fee study, let's say we are looking at taxable bond funds. 6 of those 17 investment categories within taxable bond funds actually saw increases in total expenses. So when you look at the high level view, what we're trying to do is be able to provide those breakouts by investment category and fund size so that you can actually see the categories and the components and what's happening within the industry on a more detailed, granular basis.
No, it sounds like it's going to be an incredibly, incredibly useful resource for boards and their advisors to be able to have at hand, even if it's not something to read left to right all the way through, but to
Right.
be able to dive in and draw the comparisons. I think so many of the elements that separate great decisions from suboptimal decisions is having that context and being able to make comparisons.
That's great. And we feel the same way. I think the more a board has access to, particularly to make those decisions during the 15C process, is beneficial. So this is just a broad view. It gives them that insight, and I would completely agree.
Fantastic. Now, I know this is outside, strictly speaking, the fee studies report, but there's been so much talk about ETF share classes
Oh,
in the
right.
market. Uh, Given the resource now that the fee study has, when should boards be able to expect to have, I guess I'd call it, better access to data on the changes of expenses relative to double clicking specifically on those funds offering ETF share classes?
Well, I think what we're going to be looking at is we will see data, expense data coming through in 2026. But I kind of have to highlight a couple of things. There's a lot of considerations with bringing out these ETF share classes. Really looking at evaluating whether or not it's going to be in the best interest of the current shareholders as well as future shareholders. So there's an abundance of criteria that fund managers are going to have to go through before they even propose these share classes to the board. Um, I want to highlight as well that, Dimensional Fund Advisors, DFA, has already done this, right? They're the first guys out in 2023 that really went for the exemption with the SEC. They've already registered 13 ETF share classes with the SEC. So we already have those preliminary fund fees and expenses from just DFA. But you're talking, Fidelity, some of the other big players are going to be coming out in 2026. I just don't have a really good answer as to when, but we do expect some of this data coming through in 2026.
That's great to know. Great to know that it's on the horizon. Just as a final point, everyone
Sure.
who's sitting in on a call like this knows that our industry is changing incredibly, incredibly rapidly. Looking into your crystal ball and just looking across the industry as you're seeing it, what do you see on the horizon in 2026 and beyond that be of interest to the people listening now?
Well, you're right. There is a lot of change, and it's actually very difficult to keep up with, I think, in general. Luckily, we have so much data to look at. But we look at in terms of fees and expenses. We're going to continue seeing that force of reduction in expenses coming
Mhm.
through for the active open-end mutual funds to remain competitive. I think it's pretty safe to talk about the continued rationalization of fund lineups and third-party
Mhm.
service negotiations that are already taking place. We've had more board meetings this year that have really focused on those types of reductions in expenses. And then once you have those share classes from the ETFs coming out, we do expect to see some impact from the economies of scale, growing those assets, having that economies of scale of having those expenses
Mhm.
across more assets. That's definitely going to push expenses down as well.
Fascinating, fascinating. So much to be excited about, so much to monitor and keep an eye on. I want to give you, Melissa, the final remarks.
Oh, well, great. I just want to say thank you very much for talking with me about this today. And, the next annual fee study will be covering the fiscal year in 2025 in a report, and that will be available probably about the summer of 2026. And that's when everything is actually filed and processed from fiscal year in 2025 through 12/31. But also, I just want to say we've had such great success partnering with Practus between our webinar and then this interview. So we really look forward to working with Practus more, bringing out some of those fund content, whether it's expense or 15C from both of our organizations going into 2026.
Well, thank you very much, Melissa. I've learned a lot. I hope everyone in the audience has learned a lot. Thank all of you for tuning in, and have a great rest of your week.
Great. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.